we want to do, again, is to continue taking current events and look at dissecting media interpretation of these current events, particularly as it relates now to the upcoming election, and discuss what quite often is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. You see it in the media, you think you've gotten all the facts in hand, you make a decision as a potential voter, and come to find out you get half the truth, or you get none of the truth. Sometimes you get the truth, but a lot of times it's a big fat lie.
Oh yeah. Well, I keep waiting for my friends who voted for Joe Biden to apologize for the mess that he has created for us. You know, I mean, can we have some accountability?
Well, we're hoping that we'll do our small part for that to provide it. For you watching the show today, if you like what we're doing, please recommend us to your friends, forward the episodes to your friends, try to get the word out. We feel it's important to do our part, especially in this upcoming election where there's so much misinformation coming out. And in that regard...
Today we want to talk about the Georgia State election with Herschel Walker and Reverend Warnock, the two who are running for Senate in our state. And they are as far apart as they can be, right?
Absolutely, it's unbelievable. You know, from our perspective, I should say, the first thing that's astonishing, and we covered this in the last episode quite a bit, was how the Reverend Raphael Warnock could take the political position he takes as a man of God.
Right.
It's astonishing, and I listed some stuff here just to remind people. For example, Warnock. Pro-abortion, pro-critical race theory, pro-trans rights, pro-Green New Deal, pro-Marxism, anti-fuel. We said anti-military.
Yeah. He has a positive spin on all of those issues, but he is endowed with the position of preaching from Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. And so I think that what has happened is that he has fooled people. He in no way represents Dr. King, but he
doesn't represent God.
No, and he certainly doesn't represent the Lord. And so we need to put the spotlight on a guy like this. He is anything but aligning himself with biblical truth. If anything, he's a heretic. You know, he has really distorted the scriptures and preaches, you know, he talks about us being God. Well, there's one God, and the Reverend Warnock is not he. So just out of the gate, we have to realize that this is a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Absolutely. One of the things I don't know that we covered last week is, you know, his stand on law and order. He has referred to the police as brutes, thugs, and gangsters.
Yeah.
And, you know, the communities that suffer the most are the poorest communities in the big cities, and the people that want law and order are the people in the big cities and the poorer communities. And it's being completely misinterpreted. Like the most important thing we do is reform the law and order, the justice system. Well, there's some of that's required. Certainly, you know, the tendency to lock people up too fast, and people that can't afford to pay for bail, you know, they end up in jail for like misdemeanor crimes and stuff. So I understand on the one hand, but on the other, oh my gosh.
Right. Well, I have a gentleman in my church he's a police officer, been there for 15 plus years in the worst precinct in Atlanta. And his opinion is real simple. Their hands are tied. They have to be more cautious about keeping the law than they do, you know, protecting the citizens. And it's really a big deal. If you're in the midst of, you know, enforcing the law, the first thing you got to think about is somebody got a camera breathing down my neck while I, you know, intercept this drug dealer who's shooting up the neighborhood. You know, it's a really big challenge for these police officers to enforce law.
What's important, just as it's also happened in the military, we talked about that with a lack of meeting recruitment goals. But the thing that's happened is in the face of the BLM riots and the movement, the push by the Marxist socialist, more structured group of activists, is that this push to defund the police and reform the police resulted in just tens of thousands of experienced, decades of experienced law enforcement officers to say, I've had enough. I am going to retire. I'm moving on to greener pastures. I can't stand this anymore.
Right.
And what happened? We ended up with a lot more crime. Crime is just across the country, murders, violent crime, felonies. And you can't pass a TV on a news channel these days and not see some kind of an awful violent crime being committed on an individual.
Well, so if you want to put it point blank, why should we vote for Herschel Walker and not Mr. Warnock?
Well, Herschel Walker clearly is the anti-Warnock.
Right. Number one.
Yeah,
Get rid of Warnock. That's one of the reasons.
He is a devout Christian who, in this, I'll go back to the attack ads. We see, at least, I don't know if they're national, but at least locally, Raphael Warnock has just taken
smeared him.
A full-slated confession by Herschel Walker. He wrote a book about his mental health issues back in early 2000s.
Right.
And then he did an ESPN special where he and his wife, there were interviews, talked about his struggles.
Yeah.
So this guy is confessing. And this is a guy who can empathetically speak to other people. Now it's like, I feel your pain. I understand where you're coming from. And Warnock just, out of context, took stuff and made my mother.
Yeah.
I sat at a table with her the other day. She goes, Herschel Walker's a thug. And I said, what?
Right.
Where did that come from?
She's believing the sound bites.
Yes, sir.
Right?
She sure is.
Right. Well, and I think that what we see with Herschel Walker is that he is loved by many in this state for more than his football career. He's loved by many because he is pro-family. He is, pro-country. He is a guy who loves this state. And people like Stacey Abrams and Warnock, they have this way of, this is the worst state in the union and, things of that nature. And we've got to take a look at that. When somebody, out of the mouth speaks, what we really believe, it's in our heart. And these casual comments are, this is an indictment against us as a people.
And you look at their campaigns, not only is Herschel Walker a family man, he's also a small business owner. He started his own business and has grown it. So he understands what small business owners are going through, for example. So, he's all on board with the, smaller government, less regulation, less government spending, and lower taxes. And if you are a small business owner, small businesses, if you don't know this, they hire 44% of all of the employees in the country.
Right.
They make jobs. And if you destroy the ability of small businesses to, first of all, start up and then continue, the ability to grow, the ability to pass it on to your children, you're going to destroy a significant part of the country's economy.
Right. Well, and we need his seat in the Senate, not only for our state, but for the country. And that would be a major boost to, the conservative vote in the Senate. And we want him positioned there. I believe that he's the kind of guy that is not going to go to Washington for himself. He's going to go to Washington because he believes God is calling him there, and he's going to represent the conservative, constitutional folks out there, right?
Yep. And he's got a good heart. He's not a big attack ad guy, at least not so far. That could change. But he wants to unify and bring people together, particularly for the state of Georgia. It would be wonderful to see a senator, for once, address his or her state's issues rather than do this unified, monolithic vote for, vote against kind of thing that we've got going on in Washington right now.
Yeah.
So I think you need to consider that Georgia voters anyhow,
Right.
who are going to be voting for the senator and have the choice between Warnock and Herschel Walker.
So there you have it, folks. The reason that we want to vote for Herschel Walker is that what he is for will help put our state back in the red zone. We want to be in the red zone in this state. Conservative values, constitutional, and at the end of the day, a God-fearing man who will do the right thing. And that's our heart. We want to transition to what's happening in California with the abortion laws.
Yes, we sure do. And there's a saying that as California goes, so goes the country, because it's the biggest state in the country. It has the largest population in the country. And when California initiates bills that get signed into law in California, quite often they spread to the other states. Abortion is just awful at the top of the list. A quick example before we really get into depth about that is this morning, the governor of New York looked at what the governor of California was doing with demanding that only electric vehicles be sold in the state of California starting in 2035. Now New York has said the same thing. You know, we don't have the capability or structure, but that's the kind of stuff where you send somebody like Herschel Walker, you know, to the Senate. You can shut down some of these waves of liberal thinking
Policies,
and laws and policies from going into effect, as, for example, the Quality Act. But
yeah, when you cross the California line, you see the billboard, welcome to California, where abortion is safe and legal. Is that really what we want to see when we roll into a state like California? And yet that's what's happened. And so they are on course to set the standards for abortion for all the blue states in our country.
it wants to be the abortion capital of the United States, almost like, I hate to say this, but like for women that want abortions, it's like an adult Disneyland. Let's all go to California, get our abortions, have a good time in California, and go home. And it's like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
154,000 abortions in California. The next largest state for abortions is New York with 110,000.
Right. Yeah, it's one every 97 seconds. And so for those of you that don't realize this, the reality is that even though Roe versus Wade was overthrown, abortion continues in many of these states. And so we have not won this war. There's a lot we have to do.
Right. We're going to talk about the law here in just a minute. We're running out of time in this segment, but we don't want to be interrupted when we talk about specific details of what's happening in the California law that was just signed by Newsom and by what's going to happen in the upcoming election in November with regard to altering and codifying in the state constitution.
Right.
The very concept of abortion, basically without limits.
Right.
In a state constitution.
Right. Yeah, and so this is why we have to vote. Here in the state of Georgia, we have got to vote. And so I encourage you, get out there, know your issues, and vote.
I'd like to continue along the thread of California and the abortion law. Philip has already brought up the part about welcoming billboard signs. Come to California and get your abortion. I don't know what you get with it. I think you get a bag of goodies or something. I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reality is that we've got to recognize that not only is California going to be one of the lead producers, or New York, I think they're in competition for who can take the state down the fastest. But what we're really dealing with is, it's a belief system, it's a worldview, and we have to understand something. The right to life is God-given. It does not come from the government. It is not a woman's right to choose. the moment that she conceives a child, that child is God's idea. And so if you take the life of that child, whether a day old or 15 weeks or whatever, you are intervening and taking over God's plan. And at the end of the day, you're taking someone's life. And so I want to say to you women out there, this is something that we can turn around. But there's got to be some conviction that comes back into our culture.
Yeah, we don't want to diminish the concept of the creation of life to something that is irrelevant and meaningless in
Right.
favor of someone's personal goals and ideals, and view this as just a stumbling block.
Right.
You know, the becoming pregnant and carrying a child to term, to giving birth, it should not be relegated to like taking out the garbage.
Right. Well, and at the end of the day, when we look at the percentage, because everybody that's on the pro-abortion side wants to say, well, what about rape? What about incest? Those are less than 2% of the cases. Most abortions are the result of lifestyle, which means I don't want the baby. And so this is something that we have got to bring back to the focus here.
In California, Gavin Newsom is the governor, and he's a president wannabe.
Right.
You may have seen him in the news recently. Biden was out of town, and Governor Newsom's walking around the White House looking like he's measuring for drapes and curtains and stuff.
Right.
Well, in California, they run their state government a little bit differently, and it's a way that Governor Newsom would like to run the country.
Right.
And basically, the way it's been districted and the way the legislature is laid out is California is essentially a one-party system, and the state laws get passed by simple majority vote in the state. And so, for example, one of the things I was astounded to find out was that Governor Newsom, so far this year, has had 1,100 bills come to his desk to be signed into law. 1,100. He's got 550 on his desk this week that by tonight, this Friday, the 30th of September, he needs to either veto or sign. And that's because when, as you see on TV, when they say democracy is under threat, democracy is simply a simple majority, knee-jerk, spur-of-the-moment response to a problem at hand. There's no thoughtful consideration. There's no opposing point of view. It's just like, write a law and let's make some regulations.
Right.
So it's awful, but that's the way he'd like to run the country. And the thing is, he's been running California for a substantial amount of time now. And I think there's some things you should know about California, and I'm going to just read a little bit of these here. One is that as much as Democrats scream about economic security and balance, minimizing the wealth gap, California has the largest wealth gap in the entire country. So all of the stuff they're talking about and all the democracy in action in California, and guess what? You got poor people, you got rich people, and you've got nobody in between.
The rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Exactly. Some other things of the policies that they've created in California. You have one is California has the largest homeless population in the country. California has the largest number of people living in poverty in the country.
Wow.
California has the most abortions of any other state in the country. Public education has just tanked. You know, once upon a time, they used to be doing pretty well. California now ranks 39th out of 50 states in public education. And it's like, wait a minute, what's all this progressive, modern, pay the schools, support the unions? Isn't that, California ought to be number one. It's 39, and it is very unsafe. It's one of the most unsafe states for school-age children of any state in the country. It's like last or very nearly last in the country from bullying and all the kind of things, again, that you see.
So it's no wonder that people are leaving there in record numbers. You know, they're moving to Texas. They're moving to states where they're conservatives so that they can, reestablish themselves in neighborhoods and cities where they're protected, where the laws, are in favor of pro-life and the things that they really believe in. And so all of the conservatives in the state are leaving.
Big businesses too, because
Right.
the government is strangling. They tax outrageously businesses, and they're big businesses now have decided to pull up stakes and move to Texas and other cities. They just cannot afford to pay the highest state income taxes in the country anymore. Business taxes, it's strangling them. And as you said, the population, never in history in California, but for the last 2 years, population has declined because of the policies clearly that are happening in California. They're so pro-trans, biggest trans population in the country. They're LGBTQ, biggest population in the country. It's like the morality, it's like a big vacuum cleaner sucking immorality into the state. But on the same time, the people with moral values and freedom loving are leaving so that they can go pursue their American dream.
Yeah, you're right. And you look at biblical history, Sodom and Gomorrah and other cities throughout history, the decline of civilization is a result of sexual immorality. And so we have to recognize, we got to pay attention. We can't just throw away California. We got to recognize that when that kind of leadership takes over, we have to stand up, and we have to stand up when there are some great churches and great pastors and leaders in California who don't want this. Okay. Che Ahn stood up in San Francisco and he literally sued the government for shutting down churches and won the case. They had to literally pay him $1+ million for shutting down churches. And so we realized that we can do something about this, but the places where we have to learn to do it is voting.
Right.
We have to take our issues to the street. There are places like Palmdale, California, where this couple literally got involved and they overthrow one of those two. They won the battle for the COVID oppression that was going on there, and they got it changed. They created a city ordinance, so we can do something about this.
Yeah, and again, vote.
Yeah.
If you're considering, even pro-abortion people need to consider this. California's the governor signed into law a incredibly liberal pro-abortion law, and the state legislature in a bill signed by him also have put on the November ballot in California the opportunity for voters to vote to codify this extremely liberal abortion bill into the state constitution of California. Governor Newsom wants to be president. It all comes back this way. And for pro-abortion people, here's what he's talking about. Full-term abortions for any reason.
Right.
And the purpose of the bill specifically would be to protect the doctor's friends, the mother herself. If she has a full-term a birth and then decides up to 28 days after, that's the what do they call it? The perinatal period, something like that. For 28 days, they can decide without any kind of civil criminal penalty to deprive the child of life.
This is legalized murder. This is what we're really. Let's just cut it to the quick here. This is legalized murder. You got a child whose greatest need when they are born into this world is security. That's the first thing they need. They need to know that they are safe. And we are stealing that from them in the name of what? Right?
Personal.
Our right. So when is murder okay with God? And as Christians, if you're voting for politicians who are creating these laws, then you're complicit.
Yeah.
You are complicit with that law. And so you need to take that into account. I don't want the blood of the innocent, the unborn, on my hands.
Yeah, if you're pro-abortion, you still have to stop and think, do I really want to allow a child who is born to be murdered? I mean, and the idea, euphemistically, they call it comfort care, but what they do is a baby is born and they deprive it of food and water and let the baby starve to death and maybe give it some drugs to make it comfortable. But then you absolve the doctor and anybody associated with the birth from any kind of criminal liability. Mm-hmm. Well, the other side of that question is, when is a baby entitled to the full rights and benefits, protections under the Constitution?
Exactly.
You know, it can't be they're denied for 28 days after they're born.
Right. Well, this is truly something that is the evolution of socialism, Marxism, and we need to hit this hard. We need to recognize, nobody likes to talk about this stuff because it's painful, it's intense. But folks, this is why we're in this condition, because we have not spoken up, because we have not been courageous. Mm-hmm. And so we're jumping into the fire. I'm a pastor. He's a retired Top Gun pilot. He deserves more, intense time than I do. But listen, we're doing this because we want to bring this to your attention.
One last thing that we ought to mention here is this has just happened. This is current event stuff. Reverend James Harden.
Yeah.
Compass Care Pregnancy Services.
Yeah.
This man runs a pregnancy crisis center for basically pro-life women, and he noted in what I saw in the program was that the 71 pro-life clinics have been bombed or vandalized so far. The FBI has not arrested one single person. Not one single person so far. But he had CCTV footage of the vandals,
security camera stuff,
who firebombed his facility. And the FBI initially didn't look at it. They had the sheriff and local law enforcement looking at it, but the FBI got a hold of the footage. And guess what? Not only did they not arrest anybody, but they won't give him back his personal footage because they're afraid that if he puts it on Facebook or someplace, it'll promote right-wing extremism. So, thank you for tuning in.